Hello, everyone. This is the Cluster API Officer meeting. Before starting, usual reminder that we are bound to CNCF Code of Conduct. Today is Wednesday, 19th of March. As usual, before starting this meeting, what we do is we give room to new attendee to introduce themselves and to say hi to everyone if they want to. Okie dokie, looks like we don't have a new attendee today. Let's move to open proposal readout. We have one open proposal, which is the in-place update. I don't know if someone want to give an update now, but I also saw that there is a topic in agenda later from Daniel. So maybe we should talk about this proposal later. Is that okay, Daniel?
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we can move to discussion topic. There are two which are not named. I think they are from Matt or the release team.
Yeah,
Matt?
sorry, I should have put my name on there. They're self-explanatory. We got the beta 0 out yesterday. Fabrizio is going to talk a little more about the details, I assume. And there's two patch releases. 1.8.11 is pretty small, but 1.9.6 is pretty substantial. So if you're using either of those releases, you should probably upgrade. And everybody was super helpful, especially the maintainers. Thank you for being available. I know it's kind of a late day for you guys. And the CI and comms teams did a great job. We were a little worried because we changed the playbook at the last minute, but things went fine.
Yep. Thank you. I added a point just to give a shout out to the entire release team. It was really amazing to see the team working yesterday. We changed the playbook in order to get ready for V1 Beta 2, but the team really nailed this down. Congrats again to the entire team. What is happening? So, as I said, we are moving fast to 1.11 development. So that's mean a few things. First of all, code freeze is in place. We have a release branch, and we are going to continue the stabilization of v1.10 release into the release branch. And in parallel, we are starting to get main ready for v1.11 development. And immediately after, we're going to start introducing the v1 Beta 2 API. Is there some question about this? I see congrats, a couple of congrats for the release team, and I cannot agree on this more. So if we are okay with how we are proceeding with our development, let's move on to the next topic, which is Stefan.
Yep. Can you click on that link, please? So I don't know who remembers, but we were talking about COD migration, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Basically, we saw that there's a new edge case, or basically, I was playing around a bit and I found a case that still was broken, basically, and that could happen fairly quickly. Basically, the idea is, I mean, the storage, basically, the thing that was broken is that if you run storage migration on a custom resource, it was doing a no-op patch. So basically, just we were doing like a server-side apply without any spec or status fields. But that still requires that a validate update validation basically works and is not failing. The problem is if your object is already invalid before we try to do a no-op server-side apply, the validate update hook still complains, at least for a cluster object. So what this PR mainly changes is that whenever possible, so that's like a configuration option on when you configure a CRD to be migrated. Basically, per CRD, you can decide that instead of using the regular endpoint to do this no observer set apply, you can use the status endpoint. And a nice thing about using a status endpoint is that usually our webhooks are not configured to validate on a status endpoint. So basically, we're just going around our validate update hook and all those problems. But I think it makes sense because if we do a no op update, nothing actually changes except that object gets rewritten in etcd. Yeah, so that's the main improvement. A bunch of other changes are just like if some of those migrations are failing, basically we're not just failing on the first one and requeuing. We just try to migrate as much as possible in one reconcile. And then return all the failed ones as errors at the end. Yeah, I think that's mostly it. So this is mostly an FYI, in case you're planning to use this component in your provider or something. There's a new config option. This PR also updated migration docs. So the v1.9 to v1.10 migration docs, not the CRD migration docs. To also mention that if you configure the status thingy, then you also need status permissions. What I saw in Copy is that basically usually you already have them because if you own a CRD, if it has a status field, then usually you have a controller actually writing that status field. And if you have that, if you have all of that, then you already have status permissions because otherwise your controller wouldn't work. So I only found one case in Copy where we did not have the permissions yet, and that was basically the IP address claim CRD, which is something that Copy deploys, but it's getting reconciled by other providers. So usually you don't need additional permissions. Yep, that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah. By the way, thanks to Christian, he had like this idea of using the status endpoint, which was pretty nice.
Yep, I confirm. Echo. So, is there some question for Stefan? Okie dokie, Mike, your topic.
Yeah, so there is an autoscaler bug that's been around for a while now. I think we've known about it for a year or two. And I've been doing some work on it recently, and I think I've made some positive impacts on the stability of the autoscaler, but I wanted to talk through some of the implications here with the group, just to make sure that nobody has I don't know. I just want to keep everything like open and transparent, and like some of the behavior of the autoscaler might change slightly around like failed and deleting and pending machines. And I think people should be aware of this. So this bug, and some of you may have seen this, you may not have seen this. It really depends how much you work with the autoscaler. But this bug can come up, and there's this log line that says decreasing size of machine set or machine deployment, depending on what you're using. And then it'll give you some kind of like numbers and this like, and then it will say it failed to decrease the node group size, right? Now, this message is generated because the core autoscaler, as opposed to the provider implementation, the core autoscaler thinks there are, n many nodes, and maybe the node group is telling it that it has n+1 instances. And so the core autoscaler would like the provider to reduce the number of instances it has so that the records are all, proper, right? And if it fails to do that for some reason, it creates an error that causes the cluster autoscaler to basically continue a loop that it's had, or break out of a loop that it's in. And that loop is going through all the node groups that exist within a cluster. So what you might experience as a user, right, is that let's say I create a machine deployment in some zone. And after creating it, I lose a quota there or something, or I hit a max quota. Now, when new machines are created in that zone, they'll come in as failed. And if I had multiple machine deployments that were all doing cluster autoscaling, the autoscaler would stop processing node groups that were in a list after the first one. So this goes back to the question of like when you list from the API server, if I say, give me a list of all machine deployments, whatever order they come in is the order that the cluster autoscaler will start processing them. And so if it gets part of the way through and gets an error adjusting the target size on one of them, it will fail, it will stop processing all the ones after it. And what ends up happening then is the cluster autoscaler can get into a situation where if the failures in one node group don't get resolved, it could be hours or days before it corrects itself. And so this is causing the cluster autoscaler to stop working in these cases. Now, part of the reason for this is because this decreased target size function, the way we have been counting nodes in the cluster API provider is that we list all the machines that are associated with a scalable resource, and then we start trying to parse like what state those machines are in. The problem is that we weren't properly removing machines that were in a deleting state or a pending state or a failed state. And so this meant that the cluster autoscaler got into a position where it could no longer adjust the size of that node group, and it disrupted the functionality for all the cluster autoscaler. So to fix this, what I've done is I've changed the way that we detect the nodes in this decreased target size function so that we can properly identify nodes that are in failed, pending, and deleted cases so that the cluster autoscaler
Mike, it seems that we are
And he's
losing
gone.
you.
Yeah, so it's not just me.
Yeah, I saw a couple of so we lost Mike.
He's back.
can you when did I stop
Yeah.
talking? I don't know what happened. It just crashed on me.
Yeah, sun was gone and now you're back.
Okay, is everyone still awake? Like I didn't bore you all to death yet, did I?
No,
No, no. It was
Okay,
getting
good.
good.
On contrary.
Okay, where did I leave off?
you were explaining basically that you changed how the autoscaler is figuring out which
Right,
state
okay,
are the
so
machines.
yeah, so we have a function internally that's called nodes, right? It's part of the cloud interface, and that nodes is supposed to return a count to the cluster autoscaler, you know, about how many nodes are actually seen. And so I've changed that function now so that it's properly counting nodes that are in pending, deleting, and failed states, and it's prepending them with like a guard that we use internally on the a guard value that we use on the provider ID internally in the autoscaler. And this allows us to detect what state the machines are in as we process the requests from the core autoscaler. So the behavior that's going to change, or what you might see when you're running the autoscaler, is that now if a machine goes into a failed state in a node group or in a machine set or machine deployment, the cluster autoscaler will continue to process. And if that node stays in failed long enough to hit the timeout for a failed node or any of that stuff, it will just get removed. Also, the cluster autoscaler can now properly adjust the replicas back down. So if in at time segment n, the cluster autoscaler requested to create a machine, and then at time segment n+1, the cluster autoscaler realizes that it doesn't need that machine anymore, it can now properly reduce the replica count because it sees that a machine is in pending state. It's still provisioning into the cluster. What I can see from tests that I've been running internally at Red Hat is that I think this is improving the stability of the cluster autoscaler in general. But it does mean that the cluster autoscaler now becomes more automatic. It's going to replace nodes that are in failing states for you. It might delete a node that's in pending as it's coming up. And if it sees a node in deleting, it's going to ignore that and allow it to be deleted. So I wanted to kind of describe this here in case anyone had questions about it, and also because you might notice that machines in failed state now are getting automatically reaped by the cluster autoscaler after some amount of time, depending on how you've configured it. So does that all make sense to everyone? Does it sound reasonable or rational?
Are there questions for Mike? I can give you my comments. So, Justin, please go on.
You can go first if you want, Fabrizio.
No, first of all, thank you. First of all, Mike, thank you for bringing this up. Really appreciate it. It seems it is hard to give a feedback without testing it, but it's at high level, it seems a really good improvement. Just a question. If I remember well, Autoscaler is sort of linked to the Kubernetes version that we are running. Are you planning to backport this fix to older version or only to the last one?
I'm doing some internal work to backport it, and I'm certainly happy to backport it in the upstream and work with the cluster autoscaler or work with SIG autoscaling to get it backported. The real question is how far would we like to backport it? I guess like 3 versions maybe.
I don't know what is cluster autoscaler support policy. I was just bringing this up because this seemed valuable. And if you are confident, I think that I don't know how much feasible or complex is to do, but in case you do it, it will be great to know. So eventually we can recommend to cluster autoscaler user on 131 or whatever to pick a patch version that has the fix.
Yeah, let me do some research and plan it out. I would love to backport this. Let me just figure out what the reasonable number of versions to backport to, and then yeah, I'll set up the backports. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much, Justin.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. This all sounds great. I have one dumb question and one maybe hopefully less dumb question. The dumb question is, I understand why you might not be able to increase the node group size. It's talking, the error you listed says it's decreasing the node group size with a decrease of -1. Is that just confusing error messages? That's the dumb question. And then I don't know if you want to just...
You mean like, are you looking at that log message that says decreasing size of, and it's like
failed
expected
to decrease? Yeah, and then it's like, but it's also like decreasing by -1. Is that actually, is that like a decrease of -1 is an increase?
Right. It's yeah, you're looking at an artifact of the logging there. I've been trying to improve these log messages, but basically I'm printing out the values so that we could match them back up to what's coming through in the code. So yes, it could be more accurate. Probably like it makes sense if you look at the code, I guess.
Okay, I was just confused why a decrease would fail, but it sounds like it's not a decrease, it's an increase. So that makes more sense. The trickier question is, you talked about this behavior where when a node is like sort of stuck in a state for a long time, we might override it in the autoscaler. Is that or machine? Is that something which the autoscaler should be doing, or should that be the machine set controller maybe that like does that, right? Like, where's the right place for that sort of logic? Like the fact I see autoscaler is like computing the optimal number of replicas, and then I had thought, I've been away for a while. I thought that the machine set would be the one that actuates and does that.
Yeah. So first of all, what Joel is saying in the comments about the delta here, it actually is a decrease because like we're trying to delta -1 on the expected or whatever. But yeah, in that note, it looks kind of weird. But to your second question about if it's sorry, I lost track. Could you restate it again, Justin? I'm sorry.
I think you said, for example, that we will force a delete after a certain amount of time.
Right.
For example,
the cluster autoscaler has two mechanisms for deleting nodes that it sees in node groups, right? Because it doesn't actually delete the node objects or anything. That's up to the cloud provider to do all that kind of stuff. So what ends up happening, one method for deleting a node is that the cluster autoscaler could say, hey, I know this node here by this ID, I don't want it anymore. And it can put a taint on it, and then that triggers, that should trigger a mechanism to call an internal function, an internal interface function to the provider that deletes a specific node, which the provider then should go figure out what to do. And in the case of Cluster API, we also have ways to label machines to say this is the machine that I would prefer to be deleted, and then we reduce the replica count. Another way for the cluster autoscaler to reduce size is to say, hey, cloud provider, I would like to reduce this node group by so many replicas or whatever, right? And then the cloud provider says, okay, I'll do that for you. And in the case of the cluster API cloud provider, all we're doing is reducing the replica count in the cluster autoscaler. And then it's up to the cluster API controllers and perhaps how the user has configured them to handle the deletion of the machines and everything. Does that answer your question?
So is the cluster autoscaler, are we adding functionality where the cluster autoscaler goes and
No.
Okay.
No. What we're doing is we're trying to make in this specific case for this bug, we're trying to make the cluster autoscaler more precise about when it sees a machine from cluster API, does it consider that machine a node or becoming a node or deleting or failing? And it looked like from the logic we had previously, there were some cases where this decreasing could fail based on, some like failure cases on the machines. And then also like pending machines were not, or no, deleting machines were not being considered appropriately. So our provider implementation might think that the node group is size n, and we've included deleting machines, which is what the replica count does on a machine set or machine deployment now. But the cluster autoscaler needed to know that one of those machines is going away because it wants to tell the cluster autoscaler it wants to tell the node group to reduce its replica count. And that was happening. But now, or it might not have been happening. The node might have been deleted to be replaced or something like that. But now the count is more accurate. So the cluster autoscaler can appropriately tell it like, okay, you've got a machine in deleting. I don't need that anyways. I'll let the replica count go down. Before we were kind of preventing some of that from happening.
Okay, thank you. Makes sense.
And yeah, thanks for the questions.
Thank you, Mike and Justin. Are there other questions for Mike? Okie dokie. So I think we can move on to the next topic, which is from Nolan.
Hello. So the feature of propagating annotations from a machine to its associated node merged earlier this week. Thanks everybody for your reviews. I wanted to see if anyone has objections to backporting this to the 1.9 release. There was a brief Slack thread talking to Fabrizio and Stefan. Some important things to note. The argument is there, but inert in normal functioning. The main difference that will happen by default is if there are annotations for the machine using node.cluster.x-k8s.io, those will start syncing to the corresponding nodes. So this is, I guess, an open call. If you have annotations using that and syncing them to the node would be breaking change, it would be great to hear about that. Yeah.
Yep. First of all, thank you. So I think that the ask here is, hey folks, Stefan, you have something to comment?
Oh, you can go first if you want.
Yeah, I think that this is a call for the community. If you are using a notation with this prefix, please let us know if the fact that those annotation will start to sync to the node will be annoying for you. Otherwise, we are going to backport because we think this is a good feature to have. And I was thinking, should we maybe set a lazy consensus? So if we get answer, good. Otherwise, we proceed and backport. That sound good for you, Nolan? Yes, Stefan, do we want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to say for me it makes sense to backport, and also that it shouldn't break anyone, because if someone was setting an annotation with a suffix of .node.cluster.x-k8s.io, they probably would have rather expected it would already have been propagated to the node, which it wasn't, because we do exactly the same for labels. So it's a bit hard. I mean, it's a fair question, but I assume that. So if someone didn't, no, let's say, if someone was using annotations before, for them it's probably more like a bug fix. But let's see if someone comes up it has a problem with that.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think, Stefan, we should give as a lazy consensus?
I would say maybe Friday is enough. I mean, basically, if someone is hearing it from this meeting here, it's like probably right now, and I mean, not many are watching our recordings right now, the YouTube stuff. So they should be able to at least say something like, "Oh, I need more time" or something until Friday, or already provide all of the
Okay,
details.
and so we can even if we merge on Friday, this will go in the patch release that is in roughly 1 month from now. So people
Still
still
time to
have
complain.
yeah, still have time to come up and bring up arguments if they have. Okay, Doki, I will add later the lazy consensus here, not on the PR, or if you want to do it, Nolan. Otherwise, we merge it on Friday. And thank you again for working on this feature.
Yep. Sounds great. Thanks.
Next up, Daniel.
Hey, so I wanted to give a brief overview of latest changes in place updates proposal. It's been published last week, I believe, and it's pretty short. Please take a look. Mainly, we've made some changes which align with the discussions regarding how we want to proceed with the initial phase. It will include using runtime extensions mechanism as the main, I guess, backend for performing those in-place updates. There are some changes to diagrams, and one of the examples to showcase better sequential processing of those machines one by one, and updaters as well. Well, sorry about machines, I didn't mean this. For each machine, each updater will work sequentially, but there's no deterministic order, and we're not planning to make any changes to current set of cluster API objects, which should be probably good because we want to iterate fast and start on that feature as possible. We'll also introduce in-place updates feature gate. All the code changes internally will basically be gated by this feature gate. And that's more or less the set of those things. When it comes to the runtime extension mechanism, we'll expose two endpoints. One of them is update machine, and another one is candidate machine. There are some simplifications to how we work with those request responses. We'll send only minimal set of changes to candidate machine. That means that we'll only determine if every change requested by this machine can be carried by the external updaters. If not, we'll fall back to external update logic. And when it comes to updating machines, well, we are trying to propose the idea that extensions will be idempotent, and they will not be blocking. So this means that if operation takes a long time, for example, if you scroll down a little bit, so I think in the next diagram it shows better. Maybe next one after that. So another one. There are lots of diagrams and another one. They all have many changes, but this one is pretty good. We'll just go one by one, and if the hook is pending, we'll just break the loop, wait for the expected time, and start again, polling each of those updaters sequentially until all of them are done, either failed, so reaching some completed state, based on which the machine will be marked either as ready or failed, and then we'll go to machine health checks to determine whether or not this state is final, needs rollout, or is completed, and then it can go forward with next machines. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach to Alex, me, or Guillermo, because it was a bit of time since last update to the proposal was done, and I hope that's enough for us to define the initial phase. I don't have anything much to add. More of those things are specifics. The best example to go through when it comes to review is the vSphere memory update diagram and example where there are two updaters registered at the same time. And it showcases how those updaters will process those changes one by one. It also shows that there's no particular order to this processing, so it could be start with any of those updaters, but definitely in the initial phase will work technically with single updater in mind, and also work on end-to-end test coverage for this feature. So yeah, that's brief overview. If you have anything or did review this change, feel free to ask even now. Maybe there are some questions I can answer. I hope, but if not, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Are there some questions for Daniel? Otherwise, I invite everyone to make a pass on this proposal. I think that I really appreciate the effort of the team in trying to move forward in a way that we should not change cluster API interfaces or runtime extension while we experiment and we build the scaffolding. This imply a trade-off that we are not supporting in the best way when there are more more than one external upgrader, but this is something that we can easily fix later on as soon as we have all the machinery in place. And I really appreciate the effort of the team in trying to move in the best and simplest way. So please, folks, take a look at this document. There are a lot of example diagram is really detailed. I think that we should try to make a push and get this proposal merged because the idea is consolidated and is not, let me say, the core approach is not changing since some time now. We are just having the usual back and forth on detail, but I think that it is okay to move on. Is there someone else who want to comment on this?
What would be like the target? Because I'm not sure how quickly I have how much time to spend a lot of time on reviewing this. If you say like merge and move on.
Yeah. Sorry, I forget, so go ahead.
Yeah, the proposal is not a small one, and we are just basically entering, we just finished the rush for the code freeze, and in basically we have 1 week and then KubeCon. So it is.
Yeah, and then personally I was on PTO afterwards. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I mean, if you want to merge it soon, I don't know if I will have time to review it at all.
Yeah, let's of course plus for PTO, and that's
yeah, I was not suggesting to review this while I'm on PTO, by the way, just to be clear.
Yeah, you can do it in PTO. This is up to you. But yeah, I think that let me say I will take a pass if the document is pretty clear about the fact that we are iterating and we are in experimental mode. I think that is okay. We discussed it together, Stefan, let me say the overall approach, and you are also involved in the discussion about the latest changes. So I think that you are on page. You are, let me say, well aligned. But I think that I don't know. Maybe 1 week after KubeCon, as a lazy consensus, should be something reasonable, and hopefully we will get a at least 2 LGTM from a couple of maintainer. There will be me, Christian, you if you managed it, and I will ping also Vince and Alberto. So let me say, I think that for an experiment, there is a lot of value in this document, even if it is only an experimental phase. So why not move on? Okay, I see a knowledge from Christian in the chat. Let's keep moving. So we are at the end of the discussion topic for today. There are a few provider update. First is Noland.
Yeah, I just want to let people know we've run into some failures on CI for Kappa, but we are working to get a 2.8 release out hopefully this week. So yeah, Richard and I are going through those right now and hope to have this out hopefully tomorrow, as long as we can get those resolved.
Looks great. Out of curiosity, is Kappa still release informing in Kubernetes, or?
That I don't know. I'm suspecting not. It might be informing, but it's certainly not blocking. So I'll go double check on that.
No, don't worry. I can check. I was just curious because I know that for some time it was, and then there was a little bit of back and forth because with the SIG release folks, and then I don't know where the release where the discussion ended, but I can figure it out. I will look at the release informing dashboard. Thank you very much. Next one is Daniel.
Yeah, I wanted to announce a new release. Thank you, Fabrizio, for Atom Python Fleet. This includes basically bringing up cross namespace cluster classes to as a first class citizens. I think the demo didn't render well this ASCII cast. You can go towards this if you update the. Yeah, that sounds good. I can also share my screen, or at least try it once again to show a live one, because it's very simple. And now you can install Atom Python Fleet directly from ClassSTL. It's only 5 minutes, I guess, so it's simple. But we have a set of documentation changes, a new MD book deployment with lots of detailed explanations on how this works, motivation behind this project, and what it tries to achieve. And as you can see in this demo, what it's doing, we already have installed everything, and we've created a default fleet add-on config, which we only wait for doing the job. It will install the fleet Helm up and the CRDs. It may take a while. That's why I'm still going back and forth behind this. But once it finishes, you also see some conditions on this resource. And what it will do, once you have fleet installed, either manually or with add-on by itself, it will automatically import copy clusters into fleet ecosystem, and you'll be able to provision applications from Git repositories and sources based on your labels for the clusters. As you can see, there are some states, charts installation, and feature flags we also enable in the fleet. And now we have a copy cluster which references a cluster class in a different namespace. So the copy cluster bit is in the default namespace, and the copy cluster class in the cluster class namespace, which is typically a problematic area because you have to, if you want to deploy some application via cluster resource set or Atom Python Fleet or Helm, you can define Helm chart proxy, for example, in the namespace of the cluster to deploy it. but that becomes a bit cumbersome if you want to reference something in a different namespace. For example, you have a namespace for cluster classes and applications. With fleets, you can do this. As you can see, I just applied a Git repo source, which installs Calico. And once we changed the label to match the Calico example, even in a different namespace, you can see the default. It will immediately start provisioning the Calico Helm app. And yeah, that's the example, how it goes. And then the cluster will become ready because CNI will be installed. So that's basic functionality behind this project. Feel free to try it out if you're interested in this. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the update, also for recording the demo, updating the doc. Looks like a great work for the team. Thank you very much. We are done with provider updates. So next up is feature group updates. Mike?
Yep, quick update here. We'll have a Carpenter feature group meeting today in about 17 minutes. We've recently updated to CAPI 1.9 and Kubernetes 1.30, so we're trying to keep up. We're a little bit behind, but yeah, come chat with us and learn what's going on. That's about it.
Thank you very much. So in 16 minutes Carpenter meeting, same Zoom as this meeting. So it should be easy to reach. Okay, dokie, we are at the end of the agenda. If there are no further topics to bring up, we can have some time back today. Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice one. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Fabrizio.
Thank you.